Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of E-Coffee with Experts. I'm your host, Matt Fraser. And on the show today, I have with me a very special guest, Glen Ingram. Glen, also known as the Web Accessibility Guy, is the founder of Web Search Pros Incorporated, located in Huntington Beach, California. He has over 20 years of experience in sales and online marketing, and his team at Web Search Pros has built over 1,000 websites and ranked hundreds of web pages on the first page of Google for too many search phrases to count. Web Search Pro specializes in website accessibility and compliance, which enables websites to work for those who have disabilities and help protect businesses from lawsuits and increase their reach. Glen's knowledge and expertise in this field has made him a go-to source for media outlets such as the Huffington Post, CBS News, USA Today, the Wall Street Journal, and more. Glen, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Right on. So your specialty is ADA compliance and website accessibility. What is ADA compliance for those who are completely in the dark?
Well, with regards to websites and digital, or the internet, I guess, it's making sure that every web property works for everyone, regardless of their ability or disability. Okay. Depending on which statistics you look at, somewhere between 18 and 23% of the people in the U.S. have one form of a long-term disability or another. So as someone that makes their money helping businesses get business online, it makes sense not to exclude 18 to 23% of the population.
Absolutely. So would you say all businesses need to make sure their websites are compliant with ADA and accessible?
Yeah, 100%. It's been kind of a gray area for the past about 6 years with regards to legal lawsuits and what's going on with businesses. But on March 18th, the good old Department of Justice finally put in writing that websites are part of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So it's federal law now.
Oh, okay. So they make sure that every single business has to be compliant. What are some of
That's one of the big...
Go ahead.
That's one of the big misperceptions, just so people know. There are different titles of Americans with Disabilities Act or the ADA. Title I applies to employees. So you must have 15 employees for that part of the Americans with Disabilities Act to kick in. Websites are under Title III, or what's called public places of public accommodation. So it kind of falls under a business or a building. With that, there are no minimums. I've literally seen a mom's blog. There was just a mom blogging that was sued about 2.5 years ago.
Wow. What about for websites that aren't located in the US?
I'm sorry?
What about businesses that aren't located in the US but have websites?
Does not matter. It depends on where the disabled person is located. I know here out of Orange County, California, Quicksilver was sued a few years ago, and Quicksilver is based out of Australia. So it doesn't matter where the business is based.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
And when all this started back in 2010 at an anniversary when President Obama was in office for the original Americans with Disabilities Act, that's where this whole thing came up. He suggested that it should be the Americans with Disabilities Act should be extended to websites. And shortly thereafter, there was a UN bill and 122 nations around the world signed off on this. So there are laws that have gone into effect in Canada, the UK, and different parts around the world here in the last 5 years or so.
So it's an international thing, not just specific to the United States of America.
Correct.
Okay, that's good to know. So what are some of the most common issues you come across with website accessibility?
People not taking the time to make sure images have a proper alt text to paint a word picture for someone that can't see it. You have a lot of website architecture or structure that people have never taken the time to understand. W3C, or the Worldwide Consortium's Web Basics. When someone is using a screen reader, and it could be because they have a vision issue, it could be because they have a cognitive issue, and they have a hard time reading, but they interpret information better when they hear it, they're going to use what's called a screen reader to make everything in the website audible. Well, a screen reader will peruse a web page kind of like you or I would have perused a newspaper when they were popular and going headline to headline. If the headlines aren't built properly, it's going to go kind of like a jigsaw puzzle instead of top to bottom, left to right, like we're taught to read. So not most websites don't have the ability to skip all those little buttons at the top, which is called a navigation, because if someone doesn't want to click through every one of those as they're going down to the main information, we shouldn't make them go through stuff they don't want to do just because they have a different level of ability than we do. So those are some of the primary ones. There's a whole litany of other rules as far as if you have a link on there, you have to have a description of the link. audible so that the screen reader can say, this is a link to USA Today. This is a link to ESPN or something like that. So they can determine if they want to follow that link or stay on the website. So those are probably some of the most common things we're seeing, but we're literally in these lawsuits, we're seeing everything thrown against the wall to see what'll stick, because 97% of websites don't work properly.
Wow. Can you share a story of a time when you had to help a business with their website to become ADA compliant?
Yeah, we do it every week. It was kind of interesting. We had a fairly, I would say, decent size from a revenue standpoint, online betting company that was referred to us just about a year ago. It was last summer sometime. Thankfully, they were sued out of the third district in New York. They were literally sued the week before we finished their accessible website. But since it was in New York and the website was finished prior to their going to court or their response to it, they were able to make the lawsuit go away. They just had to pay some attorney fees. So I'm contacted a few times a week by either attorneys or by businesses that have been sued, just because we've done a decent job of establishing myself online as the person to contact. And I've done so many, I've probably spoken about this 200 times in the last 3 years, whether it be online or in person.
Wow. So what are some of the common challenges you think businesses face when it comes to making their websites ADA compliant and accessible?
I think the biggest one is they don't have a clue that this is a law. They don't know they have to do this. So in California, where this has been, there have been more lawsuits in California than the rest of the states in the U.S. combined. Wow. And part of that is because in January of 2018, a law went into effect called the Unruh Act. I guess Mr. Unruh used to be a Secretary of State in California in the past, and they made it discrimination. So if you have a disability and you sue me for my website not working properly, I must pay you a minimum of $4,000 plus your attorney fees. So I talk to people every week that had no clue they had to be accessible, or they worked with a developer that wanted to take a shortcut, put a little tool on there that they thought would make it work properly for people with disabilities. And those honestly don't work. They actually provide other obstacles for people with disabilities. So it's either not having a knowledge of or a false sense of security are the two biggest issues that business owners face.
Wow. Can you tell me about the web design process when creating a website to ensure it's ADA compliant that you recommend or follow?
Yeah, you have to take everything into consideration from the beginning. So depending on the processes, sometimes people would have a designer build a look, a layout, colors and stuff like that. Then from there, you code it to make it look how it's supposed to be. Well, you either have to turn that around or train designers about color contrast. 9% of guys are colorblind by the time they're 50. So if there's not enough color contrast with the logo and the colors that you're going to use as the text and the backgrounds, and if it doesn't contrast enough, people that are colorblind may not be able to read the text on a page. So it's just understanding the rules and regulations at inception and coding it properly from the beginning so that you can cover all the things I mentioned before. Plus you have people that maybe have MS, MD, cerebral palsy, and they don't have the dexterity to operate a mouse. So a website, when it's done properly, your tab key turns into your pointer and your enter or return key turns into the clicker, and you can operate an entire website just with 2 fingers. So it's understanding how to do all this stuff from the front side. And then it's always easier to do things properly from the beginning than to go in and try and fix where someone else did something or find someone else's errors.
Are there times where you've just had to redo the whole thing from scratch?
We do that 99% of the time because we've been doing this now for over 4 years. We have our SOPs and our assembly line basically in place. So we can build it accessible from the beginning faster than we can go in, like I said, and find errors or deficiencies. We had some people that really liked one specific builder and one specific theme in WordPress. And in a div, or basically a section or a block on a website, you can't have the same piece of code twice. We spent 5 hours trying to find out where the developer hid the second code in one of the divs and still couldn't find it. So a lot of times it's just easier to pay us to fix it from the beginning than to pay us to go and find other people's inefficiencies.
Wow. Are there any tools or resources you use when designing websites to ensure they're accessible?
There are some that do maybe about 15 to 20% of checking. There are some tools like a wave by WebAIM. It's really good for color contrast. It's good for your title tag structure, and it's good for maybe some alt tags looking at it. You have insights for the web that does it. They all seem to have their own little specialties, and they'll get 10 to 15 to 20% of the errors. So you kind of have to use a multitude of tools just to double check it. We built our own to test ours, so it's a lot more efficient that we use in-house.
Oh, okay.
And then the only way to truly know if a site's accessible is to either have someone that has a disability test the site, or to learn how to use screen readers and these things to be able to test it yourself as well.
Oh, wow. So do you find that adds to the increased cost of designing a website for a business?
When we started doing this, people were, I think, extorting businesses because they were kind of under the gun and they had to do this. So I always like messing with people in our industry and turning things upside down. So we have our processes down. It might take us 1 to 2 hours more to build a website accessible than it used to once we had everything done. So I don't charge any more to build them than we used to, just because I like irritating some of the people in our industry.
Okay. So many businesses are still unsure about ADA compliance and website accessibility. Can you give a few examples of what it is and what it isn't? Perhaps
most of it is. Yeah, most of it's coding on the backside. Most of it you're never going to see. Yeah, because the people that built screen readers weren't developers. So they had to use some little nuances of HTML that 99% of people never use. Most people don't know what ARIA is. Most people don't know what semantic HTML is. So you have to understand those subsets of the language in order to make the website work properly. Other than that, when someone's looking at it, the main thing they can see different is color contrast. There's a rule that you can't use color just for unless there's a reason for it. So typically, the only time you're going to have color that's different from your normal text is either in a title tag or an H1, H2 or whatever, or with a hyperlink. There's no more of just saying, I think this word or this sentence is important, and so I'm going to change the color without having a reason for changing the color.
Wow. So there's a lot to learn about this. You had mentioned earlier about using the tab and enter and the semantic structure in HTML. So are you saying that pages now have to be built like a high school essay, in the sense of, like a lot of marketers use Surfer SEO and to tell them how to structure the pages. And many times it'll tell you to use an H1 and then a whole bunch of H2s. So you're saying that according to ADA and what's the legislation, there actually has to be H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, H6, and corresponding paragraphs to go with those?
You can only have one H1 on a page, which all this comes from the W3C, or the Worldwide Consortium. They're the same people that make the website accessibility guidelines or content.
Okay.
So
if people want to find out about that, they can go there and read those accessibility guidelines on the W3.
Yeah, it's a great read.
Okay. Sure.
Especially if you want to fall asleep.
Yeah, of course. But hey, if you're going to not get sued, then it's worth it to educate yourself. But going back to that, we all know from an SEO point of view, you shouldn't have more than one H1 on a tag, period. But what about, multiple H2 tags
each div has to start off with an H2 after that. You can have H2, but once you go to an H3, you can't go back to an H2. So you can repeat or descend. You just can't reascend.
Okay. That makes so much sense.
And most people are lazy and don't understand that you can just change the size or the boldness with CSS. They're just used to doing, I want this one to be bigger, so I'm going to put an H2, then I'm going to do an H3 and H2 instead of taking, again, 10, 20 seconds longer to do it properly.
Yeah, exactly. You want you want it to be an H1, H2, and H3, but you want them to be all the same size, and then just use CSS to declare the font size of those things, which, I've come across that as well. Are there any challenges?
It's really good. And you know what? I can't tell you how many times I'm brought in to consult on why a website isn't ranking someone that spent thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars on SEO. Cool. I was just looking at a plastic surgeon site in Texas here last month, and literally they had 11 H1s on their homepage, and not one of them said plastic surgery.
Glenn, you got to be kidding me.
Nope.
It's no wonder that our industry has a bad rap in some instances. I know another business that got ripped off $100,000 by a snake oil SEO salesperson, and it's just tragic that happens. So, thanks for sharing that. So, What about an example? I asked you for an example of, you just pointed something out about that plastic surgeon website. Can you share an example of a successful website redesign that incorporated ADA compliance measures and the effect that had on the business, or maybe even the rankings?
Yeah, restaurants back in 2019 and 2020 were really hammered by lawsuits in California.
And wow, so that makes
with
sense.
My affiliation with different law firms and the restaurant associations, we helped a lot of restaurants build proper websites to protect them from being sued. And it was kind of interesting. We built one for a restaurant that had 3 locations in one city, and they were on Wix or Squarespace, one of the, I'm going to say, lesser used builders, and probably one of the ones that's a little bit less efficient working with Google typically. Okay. And just in building their website properly, they already had all the links, all of the influence coming into it over the years of paying for SEO and things like that. They just had never had a web page built properly. And it was kind of interesting as we were working with the owner. He had this artist that wanted to do these different things. And I just would ask him every time the artist would say something, I said, what's more important, the artistic bend on this or getting more or selling more food? And he'd say, I want to sell more food. Literally within, I think, 10 days to 2 weeks of building the website, we still typically within about 15 to 30 days, we're going to go in and put, Yoast or all-in-one SEO or something on there to help with all their title tags and metadata and stuff like that. We hadn't even put that on there, and they were ranking number 1 now in their city for their type of food with no meta description at all. With no meta descriptions whatsoever. Or so we went ahead and fixed that, of course. Exactly. Yeah, of course. Wow. But just the fact that they had all the outside influence, no one just ever built a page and say, hey, Google, this page is about this type of business in this geographic location. So website accessibility doesn't have to work against SEO. It can actually help. If you really truly understand SEO and you understand on-page architecture from W3C, it works hand in hand. Like you said, you mentioned earlier how many sites we've built over the years. When I went down this rabbit hole in 2018, it probably took us 3 to 6 months to really get it from doing a lot of these things. And I think it was quicker for us to learn it because we had the backbone of our web design was based on W3C website basics for SEO. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Are there any, you mentioned page builders, so I can't help but ask, is there any particular page builders that you do recommend? I won't ask for the ones you don't recommend. I'll just ask for the ones you do recommend. That you use in your agency. I mean, that would be helpful. We had used Divi with this just because they were the first one to really go down the rabbit's hole. There's nothing that's going to build accessible properly. You're still going to go in and fix some things on them, but at least they were responsive back in 2018. They would actually, when you had a problem, they would actually acknowledge there was an issue and go ahead and address it. Now, since then, a lot of them have come along in 2019 in the last 3 or 4 years, but I would say they were on the forefront of accessibility. I know as far as forms, Gravity Forms was another one that was on the forefront of working. And if you found an issue, they would address the issue. Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that Gravity Forms would tell me, don't use this because it's not accessible. Don't use this type of field. Use something else or try to use something else. So I would. Yeah. I didn't even know that. That's why this subject it's becoming very interesting to me. Mm-hmm. I guess that wouldn't be an issue. I was going to ask if you've encountered a situation where making a website accessible had a negative effect on its SEO, but I don't think that would even be possible based on what you've told me because of the, semantic building and so on and so forth of it. No. Are there any questions that I should ask you that I haven't asked yet? I guess 50,000 pound elephant is always these plugins or overlays that people are buying that are out there being sold on the internet by marketers who maybe don't want to take the time to do things right. In the old marketing adage, there's never enough time to do it right, but there's always time to do it over. You have people that are spending money on these overlays or basically 3 lines of code or a plugin, and then putting a little icon on their website thinking, oh, this makes my site accessible. I would say for the last year to year and a half, probably 60 to 70% of the lawsuits are targeting websites with those tools on them because you know as well as I do, for these serial plaintiffs and law firms that are making revenue from this, they can use a footprint for one of these little tools, and they can find every website in a city, in a county, in a state that's using them and go after them, because they know that if you're using that, you really don't understand accessibility.
So there's plugins out there that are marketing themselves as solutions, one-click install solutions that are complete nonsense. And therefore, there are law firms that they're in the business of making money by suing people, which is interesting in and of itself. And therefore, they're making themselves an easy target.
Yeah.
And the only way to really get it done is to build the darn thing properly.
Correct.
Right on.
Yeah. There's a guy named Carl Grove. Some of us kind of refer to him as the godfather of accessibility. He's been doing this for years, because a lot of people that worked with institutions have been familiar with accessibility for 20, 30 years with websites and whatnot. He actually appeared as expert witness a couple times in 2021. I think it was about a year to a year and a half ago, talking about some of these overlays and basically explaining them in litigation about this and why they don't work.
So there's so many things you mentioned, like you talked about the alt tags for images. So people used to put keywords in or keyword stuffing or making sure there's a keyword, descriptive keyword in the alt tag or even the title tag of the image. So now, can you still do that and then put a hyphen or something or a comma and say what the image is about? Or do you think that a separate field needs to be created for images, or is that what the alt tag is for?
No, the alt tag has never been for SEO. Those are people that didn't understand SEO, that were trying to do something that has no benefit for Google whatsoever. The alt title or the alt attribute that you see when you're if you're in the word part of a builder and you click on the image and it comes up, 99% of people don't know if you click advanced, it's going to come up with an advanced alt tag or an advanced title attribute. That's the only part of an image that Google uses for SEO and for ranking. So you do the alt tag to give a description. You use the alt title attribute or advanced attribute to tell Google this image is about a plumber in Los Angeles.
Okay.
So it's just different parts of the image.
Yeah, exactly. And then what about accessibility in regards to animation? So for instance, there's a lot to consider now in this regard. What about for flip boxes? If someone has a disability, they're blind, how the heck can you use both of those things and still make a website accessible, if that makes sense?
You can. It's again making sure that each image at the media gallery has a proper alt tag on it, so it's built properly. But now what you have to be concerned about with flip boxes or slideshows is the speed at which it's transitioning from one image to another. If someone has epilepsy and the image is moving too quickly, so it does flicker a little bit, you can actually induce a seizure for someone that has epilepsy. So slideshows are something that we're using less. And if we do, it does move slower just to make sure that we're not bothering someone with epilepsy.
Yeah.
So a lot of the flash and a lot of the animation is really kind of, in my opinion, older stuff that it's dead and it should have never been born, probably.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I have a Flipbox implemented on one of the sites I've made, and I'm sitting here going, do I need to get rid of that thing or not? I mean, the site's not targeting the US, nor is it in the US, but anyway. But that's besides the point. Wanting to make it accessible is my point.
Yeah, as long as the images are all have proper alt tag, and as long as it's not moving fast, you can use them. It's just being cognizant of those two things.
Being cognizant of things, yeah. And sliders, the challenges with those again are?
Same thing.
Yeah, same thing. Yeah, I've never been a big fan of sliders either. Okay, well, fantastic. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it was kind of funny. Probably about 10 years ago, I worked with this martial arts, and we probably spent more time building their header with complete animation than we did the rest of the website. But the guy thought it was so cool as the karate guy rolled in with his leg up in the air, kicking and did all these things that we would never do again now with knowing this stuff. But there was a lot of things that you could do, maybe shouldn't have done.
That you shouldn't have done. So, I see this trend in web design with designers, and they're making desktop websites look like expanded mobile sites, even going with a hamburger menu on the right-hand side. I don't like it. Is that something they shouldn't do for is it something they shouldn't do for web accessibility? Because it doesn't make sense to me as to why you're hiding the navigation. Does that design style, is that just a preference that they're doing? And what I'm trying to ask, is that something that hinders web accessibility?
I don't know, because we would never do that. That I think is just bad form. So we haven't tested. If you're on a mobile device, as long as you have your skip nav is built properly to go to the main content, not the main image, it should still work. But I don't know. When things are bad form, I don't test them, just because I think, why the heck would I ever do that to somebody? Exactly.
I think it's a stupid, with all respect for the agencies out there that are watching this, I think you should stop doing that, because I think it's a dumb design decision. And there's a book by Steve Krug called "Don't Make Me Think," and then he wrote "Don't Make Me Think Revisited," and it's all about web usability. And to me, that is a direct violation of web usability, because you're making people think. It's like, and I got another criticism from a developer who was like, "Well, all the websites you make look the same." And I'm like, "Well, dude, there's a reason for that. It's called web usability." So I don't know if you agree with that or not. I'm a big fan of Donald Miller's story brand means of building websites, and including the story brand and taking them on the journey and so on and so forth, which is a different way of thinking about websites. And when you do that, yes, 9 times out of 10, your content kind of looks the same. But when people go and buy a magazine, Glenn, the magazine layout, you could take USA Today and another magazine, and they look, they have a cover with a person on it with subheadlines and headlines. They look the same. They're the same dimensions, so that they fit in the same thing. So I think that what you've shared today is people should be designing websites with usability and web accessibility in mind. And yes, they may look the same. You don't have to have all these fancy animations and weird looking sites because you're trying to be creative. Like there's more other things to consider. Like, I don't want to get sued. I don't think most business owners out there want to get sued.
Well, I gave a presentation a few years ago, and there's one person that has heard me before brought his entire design team, and they specialized in aesthetics, medical, plastic surgery type of websites. And they didn't like my response when they were asked some questions about what you're asking about. And I said, I've never had clients that complained to me because their websites were easy to navigate and their customers purchased a lot from them. Yeah. There's a reason why you can walk into any Walmart in the country and know exactly where to go, and they build them the same. That's because they want you to buy as much as possible.
Isn't that amazing? That is exactly. Every single Walmart is built the same, or grocery store. There's other grocery stores up here where I'm from, Canada, and they're the same. The layout's the same.
Yeah.
Milk's in the back, so you walk all the way to the back to get the darn milk. They do that on purpose. I even worked in grocery stores for a few years. So I think, we
put all that candy and gum right there at the checkout, so you buy all that stuff. Their impulse on the way out. Yeah.
Wow. There was another question I had for you that I wish I had kept in my head, but it jumped out.
And so up in Canada, your law went into effect, I think it was January 1, 2021 or 2020. The difference is the states have the ability to fine businesses themselves, and the fine depends on the state. So an individual isn't going to sue, but the state can levy fines against businesses for their websites.
Oh, interesting. In the States,
your government, they like to keep the money themselves.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, even our money, but I won't go down there. I won't even go down there. Oh boy. There was a question I had, but I can't remember what it was. It was a really good question. It wasn't one that I wrote down, and it was a gosh. What about pop-ups? Like, are those,
no one should use pop-ups anymore. With Google's UX algorithm that came out summer of last year, Google said, don't use pop-ups. Pop-ups are going to be bad for ranking. So most pop-ups don't give you the ability to X out without a mouse. So if you can't X out with your tab key or your enter key, you can't use a pop-up anymore.
Oh, so make sure if you are using one, if you are going to use one, Like, here's what I'm thinking. I know it's not good for SEO, but if you're doing paid ads on a landing page and you want to include a pop-up button that is, you see this common, to subscribe to the newsletter. If you're going to do that, make sure that you can control it with your keyboard, because there's an option in there to turn it on or off. Interesting. Wow. So
yeah, I'm not a fan of pop-ups. So again, I think I understand why marketers use it, but I think there's a reason why marketing should be a 4-letter word sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. All right. Well, what's the one big takeaway you want listeners to get from this episode?
You know what? Just for people to understand that they have to take this seriously. It's an international thing. It's not just going to go. It's not going away by any shape or means.
No.
And that they need to talk to somebody that really, truly understands this, because part of my job, it seems like, is grief counselor. Because I can tell you, every time I talk to somebody, they go through the stages of grief when they get sued. You know, you have the denial, the anger, the acceptance, and on down the road.
Absolutely.
And it's just kind of, I feel bad for businesses. We had an e-commerce store reach out last fall that has been sued 3 times in 18 months because they thought the marketing company was great for SEO. I would not share that same opinion with them, but that's okay. But they went from one plugin to another plugin to another plugin instead of really ever fixing the thing properly. And e-com is where it can get expensive, because, you know, when you're looking at images and making sure you give a good description. We did a jewelry store back in 2019, and I think they had 4,000 images. So I literally had, I think, 200 hours in one person just doing alt tags.
There's no shortcut to it, is there? What was your process? What was your process for doing that then? Like, for instance, spreadsheet. I'm guessing spreadsheet and using WP all-in-one import if it's a WordPress website, and you know, making sure that you have the list of all the images there, and that would be my way of doing it. I don't know if that's your way of doing it.
That, and just making sure you're utilizing that 160 characters that you have in an alt tag to say, you know, this is a picture of a man talking to a computer with a dog looking out the window and a llama on the table, you know, something like that. So it paints a word picture of what you're seeing through the lens. So
make sure to go to that level of depth to paint a picture for the image.
If you want to CYA against some of these serial litigants, I mean, let's take a look at Domino's Pizza. It's been the most famous lawsuit. It actually went to the Supreme Court. Domino's was sued over one buy one, get one free offer that they put on the website in haste. Their website was accessible, but one of the law firms in Newport Beach, California, that sues more business, has filed more of these lawsuits than anyone else, caught Domino's with a BOGO with no alt on it. And that's the lawsuit that went to the Supreme Court.
And Domino's lost.
Yep.
Wow. Wonder how much do you know? How much was that judgment?
It's not the judgment that gets them. Okay. The judgment was $4,000, but they had 3 years of attorney fees they had to pay.
The attorney fees is what it is.
So I bet you there was a couple million dollars of attorney fees.
Instead of paying the $4,000 and wow, that was a lot of money. Yeah. I wonder why they were trying to fight it. Like, I can understand if the time and money outweighs, if you're going to save more money by fighting the litigation, I mean, 9 times out of 10, I think I've never been sued, but that you probably save more money just by settling. So what was their purpose for fighting it? It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, this all started back in, I think it was the fall of 18, right before the law went into effect in California. And this was a federal lawsuit. So it was, again, back then it was when everything started under President Obama, the DOJ never put in writing, this is what you have to do. So everything was based on case law or lawsuits. So it was still some interpretation of attorneys. We know attorneys like to talk because they get paid when they talk. So the first hearing they had in federal court in California, the judge ruled for Domino's and said, no, this is not a place of physical accommodation. So it's not part of your building. It's a website. Yeah. Well, then the plaintiff and that sued them and the attorney then appealed that. And the appellate court said a website is the extension of your physical business or acts in lieu of one if you don't have one. So it must adhere to ADA rules. And the Supreme Court refused to hear the Domino's argument, agreeing in their opinion paper with the appellate court that a website is an extension of a physical business. So it must adhere to ADA guidelines.
Wow. That's amazing. You know, I've learned lots and I'm so happy. Where can I'm going to go and learn more about this because, you know, I do build websites. mainly for myself, but anyway, it's another story. Where can people connect with you online if they want to?
I'm on LinkedIn. If they want to reach out via LinkedIn, the name of our company is, like you mentioned at the beginning, Web Search Pros. So it's websearchpros.com. There's contact information there, contact information on LinkedIn. Those are probably the two best ways to connect if they want to reach out. Are
you on Twitter or Instagram or anything like that?
I am, but I hate social media, so I'm on those as little as possible.
As little as possible. Okay. So LinkedIn is the best. LinkedIn and your website's the best. Means. All right.
I have notifications turned on for those two. I'm on those other properties, but I'm not on there very often.
Okay, no problem. Appreciate you being on the show. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, guys. Take care.
Yeah.